Brought to you by Staff DNA, the #1 digital marketplace for healthcare careers. Find a job you love today with Staff DNA. Welcome back to the WISBE Career Advice Podcast. I'm your host, Javier, and today's guest is Dr. Alan Young. He is an experienced physician and consultant who brings a powerful blend of clinical expertise with strategic business insight and acumen. His previous experience as the Chief Medical Officer, as well as other executive leadership roles, has given Dr. Young the background to have led numerous successful initiatives focused on optimizing efficiencies and improving care outcomes in clinical operations. Here are some clips from the episode ahead.
Be determined and resilient to embrace those changes and those pivots and those setbacks, because no one has everything figured out. And for you to achieve what you want, you need to A, put in the work, B, hope for a little bit of luck, and C, persevere and overcome those obstacles that will prevent you from getting there. And if you can have that mindset that that's what's coming down the road, then I think there's no more powerful force in the world than, people who are determined to achieve their goals and set their mind to it. So
we'll be discussing with Dr. Young why he went into being a consultant.
As a physician, I could be seeing patients one at a time and fixing a broken ankle or repairing a laceration or whatever it is, but I won't be able to impact healthcare at scale. And I think that for me, that the business mindset that I started to, cultivate through business school showed me that there's ways to help people through healthcare at a much more macro level.
We'll also be discussing with Dr. Young why he chose Point B over other consulting agencies.
From the folks that I met at the initial onset of joining Point B, who have been there a long time, I saw that it reflected a culture of caring about one another and retaining talent and trying to build for a long-term future, as opposed to more transactional organizations that people come and go very quickly. Like they're there for a year or two and then they go on to the next thing, or they're here for a couple of years and realize the work is overly demanding and are burning out, right? And so those are things that kind of shaped my decision-making process as I was exploring kind of my career options.
In business, it's important to know the difference between a sunk cost and an opportunity cost. Because in life, new experiences can lead to new learning.
I think learning about a concept in business school called the sunk cost phenomenon and opportunity cost, it made me think about my decisions in a different way. I think a lot of people think about all the time and money and effort they've invested into maybe their career, and medical training is one of them, where you spent countless years preparing for this field and countless dollars paying for tuition and other things, and the sacrifice you make to your personal time, your time away from family and friends and other jobs you might have taken. So a lot of physicians get in this mindset of they have this huge sunk cost, and it would be tragic to walk away from that, right? To give that all up. But business school teaches you about looking at the opportunity cost of making a change. And the opportunity cost is you want to look at what the next best option is in your life and think about whether or not you can be satisfied knowing that you've left that on the table, right? And so oftentimes people will say, well, I've been practicing medicine for X years and I don't want to give it up, but they have another opportunity to do something truly amazing and transformative. And if you think about it, what they're giving up would be not all the time and money and energy they spend, because that's already done, right? They can't get that back. But what they're going to give up is this completely different experience if they don't go after it.
Dr. Young also talks about what you might need to know if you want to be a consultant yourself.
Consulting firms are looking for maturity, rational thought, logic, empathy, and compassion for their fellow colleagues or coworkers. And so whatever story you share, I think always try to be as genuine and forthright about it, and really reflect on what you learned or what you would have done differently and what impact you had in that situation. I think that is one thing to keep in mind as you craft your messaging, either your personal statements or cover letters or your interviews. That's something to keep in mind.
AI,
a buzzword that everyone's been talking about, and artificial intelligence. It's kind of like back in the day, people would have said you have to learn about computers and how to type on a keyboard.
Yeah.
I think this is just going to be table stakes very quickly.
Problem solving is something that is ubiquitous and should be emphasized across all disciplines. And what I mean by problem solving is, how do you approach a situation that you're not comfortable with or you're not familiar with, and that has a tremendous amount of detail and information that you don't know how to prioritize? Well, you got to structure and break it down and question it and have
either a hypothesis-driven approach or a data-driven approach, right? You either start with an idea and you work backwards, or you collect the data and move forward.
And now a word from our sponsor. Are you ready to take the next step in your healthcare career? Staff DNA is not just the #1 digital marketplace for your healthcare career, it's your gateway to exciting opportunities. With the Staff DNA app, you can effortlessly find nursing, allied, physician, and advanced practice positions nationwide, all tailored to your skills and preferences. Search, apply, get hired. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Alan Young.
Thanks, Javier, and please feel free to call me Alan during our conversation.
Okay, perfect. That makes it a lot easier. So to kick things off, why don't we talk about your role at Point B? Because if I remember correctly, you've been at Point B for about a year now, and this way we can get a bit of a background on you, the work you're currently doing, and what Point B does for those who may not be familiar. Sound good?
Yeah. When I joined Point B a year ago, which is a management consulting company, what I call a medium-sized that focuses on multiple industries, but a core component of what we do is in healthcare. How we help our clients and customers is really around three main areas. One, I'd say, is technology-enabled transformation, helping organizations implement, adopt, and optimize their use of technology. And it could be all different forms, such as products from Microsoft, or going cloud with Amazon, or implementing a new CRM or ERP system. Another area we work with is clinical and non-clinical operations and efficiency. So thinking about the process and workflow steps. And we could provide product or program management oversight, as well as change management services around that. So as you change your workflows or expect clinicians and non-clinicians to do things differently, our services are designed to provide a wraparound support mechanism to ensure success and scalability for the long term. And the third area, which is probably most exciting for a lot of people, is data and analytics and understanding where AI can actually impact your organization as you move forward. So Point B really is helping organizations get from point A to point B and try kind of navigating this uncertainty we have as, especially in the healthcare industry, we move forward.
That's awesome. That sounds like a really fun job. It sounds like a great place to work as well.
It is.
So, and I know that you've been in the business for a little bit. Point B was not your first home. Would love to kind of get into your origin story, if you will, how you created Dr. Alan Young. Alan, let's talk about the beginning. So you're a medically trained professional. Now you're in the consulting world. Let's go back to the beginning. So medical school. What made you want to get into medicine?
Yeah, I'm actually an immigrant from Canada. Arrived in the United States and was studying at UCLA here in Los Angeles, and was exploring my career choices. And I kind of fell in love with being in the hospital. Really enjoyed being in the environment and working alongside doctors and seeing how they were helping patients. But then I also really was interested in the economics and the finance side. And so those kind of coursework in college really shaped kind of where I wanted to go. And as I thought about my next step, I was fortunate enough to get accepted into medical school at USC here in Los Angeles. And as I was enrolling, they suggested, or it was brought to my attention, they just started a dual MD MBA program, so a Master's of Business Administration or business school. And to me, that was really compelling, being, again, a born immigrant, had not grew up in this country, had not really experienced healthcare, being relatively young and healthy at the time, and understanding from everyone else that the complexities of the industry were vastly more daunting and intricate than what I grew up with in Canada, where it's a smaller country, single-payer government-run system. Coming to California, hearing about Medicare and Medicaid and Medi-Cal and Blue Cross and Blue Shield and everything that was confusing just made me have a lot of apprehension to think how I would be successful down the road. And so as I finished medical school training, I also did the MBA in addition to that. After that, started my clinical training in orthopedics, and from there kind of discovered a consulting career and took it from there.
So with the advent of your medical career, you're starting out and you're getting your MBA, when did you start thinking about taking that to a different industry or to a different part, using that in a different way?
As I was going through my training, I was subjected to change from what we call the paper documentation world to electronic health records. And seeing how this core technology that's more ubiquitous today really transformed the way we deliver care and how we can think about helping our patients, and the advantages of actual thinking about how you can leverage this data to improve the experience for everyone down the road. And the impact of the electronic health record really stuck with me. And I thought to myself, as a physician, I could be seeing patients one at a time and fixing a broken ankle or, repairing a laceration or whatever it is, but I won't be able to impact healthcare at scale. And I think that for me, that the business mindset that I started to, cultivate through business school showed me that there's ways to help people through healthcare at a much more macro level. And I think that really positioned me to think about how can I play a role in impacting healthcare beyond just seeing patients one at a time. And consulting actually turned out to be a natural progression of me as I stepped into a consulting role. While continuing to be a doctor locally here at Kaiser Permanente, I was able to be involved in those large-scale projects that like academic medical centers and health systems were doing to really roll out, for example, their electronic health records or their clinical documentation improvement programs or revamping their revenue cycle management operations. And these things I found actually impacted a large number of not only patients, but also physicians who had to work in and around these systems. And so that really kind of launched my career as I looked to leverage my business acumen, my interest in technology, and also the understanding of where the healthcare system is broken and needs help. And so that was kind of the origin, if you will, of why my career bifurcated the way it did.
Amazing. Now, I know that not many people that go into medicine think about leaving medicine and going into a different field altogether, but I would love to know, how did you position yourself with your skill set in medicine, your knowledge of everything on the medical side, to be successful outside of the medical field, or at least practicing medicine?
That's another great question. I think one thing that I learned as I attended business school is that despite the significant amount of education required to enter into medical school and complete your program requirements, you're not learning a lot of other skills and information or language, if you will, to deal in a non-clinical setting. And so understanding the lexicon and the lingo of what business means and the tools and the processes that are followed was really important. So being able to be in an environment where healthcare or medicine is kind of the core industry, but talking about it from a business perspective, you have to be able to be a translator of sorts and understand the connection points between the two different worlds. That having the understanding of what it's like to be in a clinic, what it's like to be working in the emergency room or functioning in the operating room at a busy hospital, and then also being at the leadership level for executives and C-suites who are running these, organizations, that helped translate, what we did on the business side to see, are we really solving the right problems for people and will they care? And the big question is always, so what? Like, you have some solution or capability, or you're talking about AI, but what does it mean to us at this location? And understanding that healthcare is really hyper-localized and regional, like what happens in California is not the same as what happens in New York. And what happens in LA is not the same thing that happens across the street at a different city. There's just a number of different variables and complexities in healthcare. And I think understanding and putting structure and framework around it is something that I learned from business school and consulting. It helps kind of break down the problem in a more meaningful way to help you really solve some of the challenges that you're facing.
That's awesome. I think that one of the things that I always enjoy knowing when I'm reading or watching anything about people's backgrounds is the point when people knew that they were on to what they really wanted to. They were making the right choice. Was there a point that you look back to and say, oh yeah, when this happened, I knew what the decisions I had been making were putting me in my proper path?
I think I'm still in the discovery phase for that as well, Javier. I would love to say I have it all figured out, but I envision I have many, many more years of my career ahead of me. But I do recall feeling a greater sense of both professional gratification and joy as I stepped into certain roles where I was able to leverage my experience and background and more than just in one area. I think that's the one thing for me that I felt very undervalued or didn't see a lot of gratification by doing something that I felt someone else could do. or potentially anyone else could do. So being like a commodity or providing a service that's pretty easily replicated did not give me as much satisfaction as being in a position to leverage the unique attributes or knowledge or experiences that I've had in a way that I could say no one else could duplicate easily, right? And so my background, my education, the work experience, the challenges I've overcome, those all gave me a unique perspective. And I share that with others and try to gain buy-in or enforce change or support, long-term growth. I think those things really resonated with me and made me feel like, hey, I'm in a position where I can actually doing what I set out to do, which is trying to impact and improve healthcare more than one patient at a time.
That's amazing. And I think that what you're doing is probably what a lot of students potentially think about when they are going through med school, how to leverage the knowledge to be successful outside of the medical industry. What advice would you give to people, or is there a situation that you encountered that helped you really understand what you were doing when you're making that switch from medicine or medical school or after medical school to a non-medical practicing career?
Yeah. I'll give you the before and the after, meaning that, something I wish I knew back then that's helpful. But when I was going through my education, I think learning about a concept in business school called the sunk cost phenomenon and opportunity cost, it made me think about my decisions in a different way. I think a lot of people think about all the time and money and effort they've invested into maybe their career, and medical training is one of them, where you spent countless years preparing for this field and countless dollars paying for tuition and other things, and the sacrifice you make to, your personal time, your time away from family and friends and other jobs you might have taken. So a lot of physicians get in this mindset of they have this huge sunk cost, and it would be tragic to walk away from that, right? To give that all up. But business school teaches you about looking at the opportunity cost of making a change. And the opportunity cost is you want to look at what the next best option is in your life and think about whether or not you can be satisfied knowing that you've left that on the table, right? And so oftentimes people will say, well, I've been practicing medicine for X years and I don't want to give it up, but they have another opportunity to do something truly amazing and transformative. And if you think about it, what they're giving up would be not all the time and money and energy they spend, because that's already done, right? They can't get that back. But what they're going to give up is this completely different experience if they don't go after it, right? So if you can honestly say to yourself, yeah, that job or that opportunity, I don't think it's going to be valuable for me, then okay, you can walk away. But if you see something that's completely aligned and excites you in a different way, but you're beholden to your past and think, oh, I've invested so much time in my career, I can't walk away from it, then I think that opportunity cost is pretty significant, something that should make you think about making that change. And the other one I'll talk about is really be always a lifelong learner and open to hearing other perspectives. I think organizations that I'm trying to support that are giving medical students, undergrad students, channels to learn and speak to folks like you and I that have progressed in our career and have like these aha moments like, man, I wish I knew this before, or no one told me it was going to be this hard, or that I could do this. And so those organizations are now available, and through the joys of, virtual meetings like this and social media and platforms, there's just much more access to other people's wisdom or information. And so I'd encourage students to take advantage of that, to join organizations, seek out communities where they're supporting, people going through medicine, pre-med or med students or residents or fellows that are going down their career. Or if you're an institute of higher learning, tap into the alumni network. People have graduated from your organization, have gone on to other things, and figure out how they got there and what else could they do, or what would they have done differently.
Well, you actually bring up a really good point. So I personally also believe that we can always learn something. The old phrase of you learn something new every day. Everyone can improve is my philosophy as well. You brought up that point. What do you think is something that everybody coming out of either it's med school going into business, or maybe it's law school going into business, or some other industry trying to go into take a similar path? What's a skill that you think that they should learn if they haven't already learned it that's really important?
Yeah, I think there's two things I want to talk about. One of them will be more technical. It will be something everyone has probably heard of. But the first thing is really to understand frameworks and structure and process. I think that's something we didn't learn enough of going through even graduate school. I think it's, we were learning disciplines and facts and memorization of detail. So that was very specific for our industry, either medical anatomy or business concepts and how to do accounting or finance or something, right? I think, though, that problem solving is something that is ubiquitous and should be emphasized across all disciplines. And what I mean by problem solving is, how do you approach a situation that you're not comfortable with or you're not familiar with, and that has a tremendous amount of detail and information that you don't know how to prioritize? Well, you got to structure and break it down and question it and have either a hypothesis-driven approach or a data-driven approach, right? You either start with an idea and you work backwards, or you collect the data and move forward. And so having that ability to structure problems and situations and create solutions and look back and say, hey, did you address all the different components that you identified before engaging in this conversation or initiative? I think that's something that everyone should definitely start to focus on. And it's hard when you're being overwhelmed with data and information you have to learn and memorize, and then taking a step back and say, well, I have to think about structure and frameworks. And so that's more of the consultative mindset, right, that comes in, that I think is helpful. The second thing is a buzzword that everyone's been talking about, and artificial intelligence. It's kind of like back in the day, people would have said you have to learn about computers and how to type on a keyboard. Yeah. I think this is just going to be table stakes very quickly. Like, as much as it's still a daunting discipline, like data science and AI is not an easy thing to pick up. People have asked me all the time, where did you start? What are the resources? I go to Google and Microsoft and NVIDIA and OpenAI, and I have ChatGPT, but where am I going to learn? And how do I learn this in a way that's effective? And I think everyone's different, but I think the caution is, as you move forward in whatever career you have or organization you're in, realize that people around you are probably learning and adapting and growing with the AI capabilities that are relevant for them in their field. And people will say AI can't replace doctors, AI is not going to replace humans, but your job may be replaced by another human that understands AI and uses it to the best of their ability to make them more efficient, more productive, and ultimately more happier. I mean, if I had AI as a physician and have to write all my notes the way some doctors are now using it to alleviate some of their pajama time, technologies like ambient AI scribes, that would have made me a little bit happier. But at the same time, there are downfalls and risks that, people need to be aware of and understand.
You bring that up at the right time, because obviously I think that is a big thing that can help people set themselves apart in interviews, is understanding AI. Because it's such a popular buzzword right now, if we took that as a table stakes, as you said, what would you say? Because I think that there's always something from a consulting perspective. You probably look at different things for people that would want to also be consultants from the medical field into consulting in some sort. When you're interviewing for new positions, coming out of medical school, coming out of maybe a practicing physician, and you're going into the consulting world, what advice would you have outside of you better know AI or know about AI? What other things would you say you should do or highlight or think about when you're interviewing, trying to make that transition to be a consultant?
Yeah, I think depending on the type of consulting you want to do, different organizations have very specific kind of process in place to evaluate who can they consider to be good candidates or good fit for them, right? So some organizations will have very structured interview steps. One firm that I worked at had what they call the personal experience interview. So they'll ask you about situations that are in your life, demonstrating your leadership or your ability to think under pressure or overcoming a challenge or failure, and having you just describe it. And, it's a human-to-human conversation. And obviously, in an interview setting, you're being evaluated. But I think consulting firms are looking for maturity, rational thought, logic, empathy, and compassion for their fellow colleagues or coworkers. And so whatever story you share, I think always try to be as genuine and forthright about it, and really reflect on what you learned or what you would have done differently and what impact you had in that situation. I think that is one thing to keep in mind as you craft your messaging, either your personal statements or cover letters or your interviews. That's something to keep in mind. And the second area is around being able to break down problems. And many firms adhere to this, and it might be different now. They'll want to talk through a case with someone in a bit that creates a situation that we may typically encounter in the consulting world from a business perspective. And there's usually no right answer overall, but there are some quantitative tasks that they'll check to see if you understand the difference between a profit and a loss, and the debit and a credit, and your growth versus failure. So just kind of testing your basic business acumen, but again, being able to break down an unknown problem that maybe one you haven't encountered before. The goal of that is to understand how you think and how you think quickly on your feet, because in the real world, you're going to be encountering a lot of these types of situations, and you'll have resources to help you do the quantitative analysis or the modeling, or putting together materials for someone to review, or preparation time to talk to this C-level executive. However, there are situations where you'll be expected to react suddenly to things that are unexpected, or variables that would maybe change the trajectory of your business plan, or fundamentally shift your organization's ability to achieve its goals for the financial year or the fiscal year. And so I think those two things, focusing on demonstrating your EQ, which is your ability to communicate, respond, how you deal with situations, and also then your technical or IQ, right? To how you can deal with, numbers and ambiguity, and kind of synthesize and come up with something that's insightful and that's tactical.
Yeah, thank you. That's great advice. So when you were looking at joining Point B, what attracted you to Point B out of all of the consulting agencies? And then what experiences did you draw upon previously that really made it the right spot for you and helped you be successful there?
I think a lot of it boiled down to the people and the interactions I had with them that really demonstrated their genuine interest in understanding and getting to know me, and seeing the potential or the impact that I could bring to the team. And this wasn't apparent in a few other organizations I joined, where a different level of collaboration and camaraderie. And so that stood out to me as I explored. The other thing that really stood out was that this company has allowed me to really be autonomous and a strong contributor on multiple levels, both as a team from a leadership perspective, but as a thought leader in industry eminence, and being able to speak and share thoughts like with you, or going to an industry conference and learning more about the technology that's out there, or publishing a thought piece about what I saw and what I think is happening in the industry. And on the side, even helping pay it forward and being knowledgeable and supportive of early stage organizations and individuals at various stages of their career through advising and mentoring. And I think the fact that Point B has enabled me to continue doing these things that give me energy and keep me motivated, that are all inextricably linked together in this healthcare industry, I think it just shows that they have given me a place to continue to grow my career, and also to build and continue to solve some of the really difficult problems that the industry faces, and do it alongside people that I really enjoy working with. And I think that, you don't find that in every organization. There's always going to be culture and personalities and commitments that, maybe conflict with that type of partnership or teamwork. But I can say that I sensed that from the folks that I met at the initial onset of joining Point B, who have been there a long time, I saw that it reflected a culture of caring about one another and retaining talent and trying to build for a long-term future, as opposed to more transactional organizations that people come and go very quickly. Like they're there for a year or two and then they go on to the next thing, or they're here for a couple of years and realize the work is overly demanding and are burning out, right? And so those are things that kind of shaped my decision-making process as I was exploring kind of my career options.
That's amazing. And so there's, of course, probably going to be other people that have started in the consulting world. What's your advice to those that are just starting out at a new organization? Because I know that when you're just starting out, there's a lot of things that people say how to be successful. First in, last out, work really hard, hustle. What's your advice to those people that are starting out in consulting?
Yeah, I think a few of the organizations I worked with emphasize this, and I never really understood how true it was until I was further along in my career. But a lot of organizations encourage you to make your own path, like define your own career. And when I say that, it's not that you can necessarily choose everything that you do, or where you fly to, or the client you work with, or what hotel you stay at, but it allows you to think about there's no straight path in consulting. Right? You can align yourself with an industry, with a capability, with a team, with a geography. And those tend to be choices that you can actively make or encourage to make, known to your team and your direct reports or your supervisor, right? And so you can carve out your own path, and the type of consultant you are will hopefully open more doors for you. But I think the key thing early on is just always be hungry to learn, always be humble, especially with your colleagues and your clients especially, and always be helpful. And when I say helpful, I mean try to do the right thing and try to add value where you can, and don't just repeat what you've been told works, right? I mean, I think the economy and the industry is changing. Our knowledge levels are accelerating greater than ever. And so what might have worked in consulting like a few years ago or a decade ago is probably obsolete now. And so if someone's telling you this is how we did it and this is the way it works, this is what you need to do, maybe, think about challenging the status quo in a way that helps you enlighten your career steps, because I think you'll find that organizations that enable consultants to do and carve out their own path tend to retain the talent longer versus places that are more rigid and have a lot more unnecessary structure or limitations, and say, oh, well, you're not ready for that, or that's not your job. You should probably just wait your turn. There's some adage in saying you want to apprentice into a role, right? But I think if the culture is not one that's supportive of you and some of your pursuits and your objectives, then I would advise consultants to be aware of that early on rather than investing several years of their career at one organization.
Good advice. Good advice. Thing that I always think about is the crossover of just starting off in an organization and all of the generations now that you're going to experience walking in. The Gen Z is going to have potentially 5 different generations that they're going to be mixed with, especially in a hospital environment. Healthcare is obviously a very multi-generational workforce. What's your take on that? I know that change management is something that is very important for many organizations, and you've been involved with that throughout your career. What do you think about if you're just starting off as younger generation, just coming into the workforce, working with a multi-generational workforce, and then how can that be your benefit, and how should you approach that so that you can find success?
Yeah. I think one thing, and I'll try to narrow it down because that's such a broad, open-ended question, which I enjoy. But let's take, for example, if you wanted to design or create something new to improve something in the hospital. I think right from the beginning, as you were in your design or ideation stage, you want to include and invite the key stakeholders, the end users, patients, doctors, nurses, whoever it is, early on in the process. I think one thing that gets lost is, well, we're the more technically savvy generation, or we know this content better than anyone, so we're going to build something and then share with others. I think what that does is that continues to maybe alienate or create a barrier between whatever that product and solution is and the team that built it with the people around them that need to use it and engage with it. And I think bringing them in early helps demonstrates a respect across, these different generations, that, hey, I respect the fact that you have been working in the hospital much longer than anyone on our team. We need your input. But I understand that you don't understand the nuances of large language models and what generative AI is doing and, what a RAG is, right? And so there could be a back and forth knowledge sharing. And I think that will help facilitate and expedite the ability for the generations to break down some of those barriers. So bringing in kind of thought leadership and collaboration early. Another area would be around really understanding and discussing what are the challenges and the pain points before bringing up tools or solutions, right? It's the adage of the hammer looking for a nail will be successful, but if you don't need a hammer, you need a screwdriver, you're probably not going to do very well, right? And so understanding the problem base and stepping back and seeing, should we approach this with a very narrow-minded approach of we have this tool or a solution, or we talk about what else do we need to solve this problem effectively? Like maybe a screwdriver or hammer isn't enough. You also need a toolkit with a number of other items and capabilities that maybe you weren't prepared for at the beginning, but you can help enable or help generate, for the team. I think so. Those two things come to mind right away about how we can solve some of these challenges of working in an environment where there's going to be different levels of knowledge, experience, age, culture differences, et cetera, moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the pieces in that same thought is being cognizant of other people's potential life things that are going on around them, because we're all complex individuals. Not everybody's going to divulge everything to you. Being in a multi-generational workforce means that you have a lot of people with different types of problems at different stages in their life. I know that your family was actually impacted by the fires recently in Southern California. How does that play into having those life things for you personally impacted your path forward thinking of the future?
Yeah. Everyone has things going on in their life outside of their work or their career. I mean, they say, working is a 9 to 5 job. There's definitely 16 other hours a day that you're not at work. And many people are fully consumed by their work. However, that doesn't go to say that people's other circumstances are not important and will not affect them at work. So you touched upon a few things, right? Your people's health. People could be dealing with various forms of physical, emotional, mental challenges that limit their ability to work effectively or limit or change how they interact with other people.
Absolutely.
Family, they may be caring for relatives that are older or may have multiple, children that they're dependent upon them and have to juggle all the demands of childcare or elder care or family care. And then third is just in general, like what's going on in the world. People are impacted in different ways by what they hear in the news or what is going on outside their front door or what their organizations that they're involved with, be it a church or a community organization or a sports team. All these things can impact them and changes how people come to work, right? And so I think the recent thing that happened in Southern California was the Pacific Palisades and the Eaton fire, one of which came very close to our neighborhood and threatened evacuation. We lost power. We weren't sure if we could, have access to our vehicle, and do we have to flee on foot? And then after all of the aftermath, we're realizing the magnitude of the destruction and the loss to people, our neighbors and friends and colleagues and coworkers and people working in the hospital who have lost their homes and yet continue to have to come to work and do their job and take care of others. And I think that just instilled in me a sense, hey, you never know what's going on and things can change in an instant. And so don't expect that if something seems like it's perfect and going well, that won't change. So always be mindful that things can change very quickly. And for me personally, it's just given me a renewed sense of gratitude and humbleness as I move forward. I used to think to myself, my surgeon friends have a different lifestyle than me, and I'm doing this job, and they seem to have some of the more worldly things figured out. And then in an instant, a lot of, people like that lost all of their possessions, right? And so I'm grateful for what little I have and the fact that I still have my health, my family around me, and a career that allows me to do and pay it forward. I think I'm very grateful. So I expect there to be continued challenges and failures in my role as this economy and the industry is struggling. I thought COVID was going to be the last big thing in my lifetime. And a few years later, I was like, I wish COVID was back, because that would have been so much easier to deal with than what's going on now, right? And so it's just a sense of, again, wanting to continue to try to help others and help organizations as they are dealing with these things on a day-to-day basis, like taking care of the sick and helping develop new therapies to cure cancer or to organize around climate change and how this is changing our ability to feed our population and find clean water. And, being a part of an organization like Point B just allows me to play a small role in that, and then helping early stage entrepreneurs and founders and executives as they navigate their career. Hopefully they go on and change the world as well.
And now a word from our sponsor. Brought to you by Staff DNA, the #1 digital marketplace for healthcare careers. Find a job you love today with Staff DNA. Well, I don't want to, we're coming up on time. Would you have any last final words of wisdom, any lessons that you learned early on that you would like to close with today?
Yeah. I think, if anything, my journey has been anything but straightforward. I think oftentimes young professionals and students will look ahead at the generation and be like, oh, Javier and Alan are there. They must have been like a straight road to success, like going to visit the Wizard of Oz, right? Just follow the yellow brick road and you'll get there and everything is waiting for you. But mine was anything but. And so what I would emphasize is that, be determined and resilient to embrace those changes and those pivots and those setbacks, because no one has everything figured out. And for you to achieve what you want, you need to A, put in the work, B, hope for a little bit of luck, and C, persevere and overcome those obstacles that will prevent you from getting there. And if you can have that mindset, that's what's coming down the road, then I think there's no more powerful force in the world than, people who are determined to achieve their goals and set their mind to it. So hopefully that reminds folks that, a little bit of a setback or failure is not the end. There's other ways, and it's definitely not a straight path. If you connect the dots, eventually you look back and see hopefully a beautiful mosaic of your life and your career that you can be proud of.
Beautiful. Yes, absolutely. Great words to live by and to take to heart. Alan, thank you so much for your time today. Hopefully we'll get to do some more soon and dive into other topics. Thank you again so much. All the success to you and Point B and beyond.
Thanks, Javier. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you.